We're going to discuss how to form a secure attachment style. And in the past sessions, if you've been following, or maybe you are new, I'll give a brief review. We've talked about childhood trauma, and we have rightly said that childhood trauma is the reason to some of the adulthood drama and mishaps that we get to have. If you are unaware of your childhood trauma and how it is affecting or how it is presenting itself in your adulthood, you perhaps would be a victim to a number of things that fall under what we call adverse childhood experiences. These are basically emotional responses, or rather, emotional responses to the distressing situations and events that we have endured or had endured when we were young. Adverse childhood experiences span from the time you were born to about 18 years. These are experiences that would perhaps be described as abuse. It could be verbal abuse, could be emotional abuse, could be sexual abuse, and even the physical abuse that we know. It could also come from a form of neglect. Maybe you were abandoned by your parents, you're abandoned by your mother, you're abandoned by your father, and so you never had that core psychological need met. And so you perhaps may be suffering from an emotional neglect or physical neglect. Aside that, it can also be spanning from household challenges. Perhaps you are raised in a home where you had to experience, or rather, where you had to witness violence in the home. It could be violence among siblings, or violence with your parents, or just violence between your parents, something close to gender-based violence. You had to see that violence, could be in the home or in the community where you were raised. That also perhaps was quite traumatizing. Or maybe you are raised in a broken home and uh, your parents were divorced, your parents separated, and at the time you were quite too young, and just that separation got to affect you emotionally. It got to affect how you bonded with your parents after they separated. Maybe you had to side. Maybe you went with your mother, maybe you went with your father, and you never developed that father figure, mother figure relation with your parents. It could also be that when you were raised in a home where people were toxic substance abusers, uh, alcoholics, and you just saw that as something normal. But then somehow it gets to affect you cognitively, it gets to affect how you behave, how your attitude, just how at times you respond and react to different people. It could also be that in your family, maybe somebody was incarcerated, somebody went to prison, and the shame of that situation has also affected you. So all these are what we are calling undesirable experience. They are our, or rather, when we have these experiences, we got to have an emotional response to these distressing events or situations that we never knew till now we are grown, because I usually tell people that when you have a cut somewhere here, you'll be able to see it and you look for a bandage to just ensure that you cover that blood and stop the bleeding, right? But when you have something that is emotional, maybe you are verbally abused, you don't get to see how that is affecting you inwardly. And so oftentimes we don't even know if our nervous system has been what we call dysregulated, you know. And all these things now come to affect how you begin to interact, your perception towards things in life, just how you interpret different things. All these things now get to affect you in adulthood. So that's just a brief summary. In case you missed the other session, that's a brief summary of what we looked at. And now with that, we are now going to better appreciate and understand what we are looking at today. So today we're looking at attachment styles. Now, attachment styles are basically our bonding ways, right? How we got to bond with our parents, how we got to bond with our primary caregiver. Perhaps it was an auntie, perhaps it was our grannies, you know, the bonding that we received when we were young is what influences the bonding that we look for when we're now adults. Okay. So when we're adults, we want to build romantic relationships. But a number of us are struggling with building secure romantic relations because perhaps we missed or lacked some part of the bond that we needed. We call these psychological core needs. To understand it in simpler terms, it's basically your need to be validated, your need to be heard, your need to be understood, your need to be appreciated, your need to just feel purposeful. Your need to know that your contribution matters. Your need to know that your emotions matter. Some of these psychological needs are needs that are very much important at particular stages as we get to grow. When we're 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, as we are getting into adolescence from 9, 10, somewhere there, these needs, these psychological needs are very much important. And a lot of people don't get to have them. So when they don't get to have these psychological needs met, there's a way that now when they're adults, they try to compensate for that. Most people today are nice guys, not because they're not because they are great guys that understand being nice. They are nice guys because it is a coping mechanism from that insecure attachment that they had when they were young. And they are basically trying to find place or room in the world. They're trying to fit in so that everybody gets to accept them. So what best way to appear to the world than being nice, right? Because you did not have this psychological need met. You never felt important, never felt validated. And so you somehow felt abandoned, you somehow felt you were worthless. And now when you are an adult, you have that fear of being a worthless, useless, you know, adult. So you try to compensate by just being nice to everyone. One of the ways that we literally know that, okay, this person is struggling with a secure attachment style is the lack of boundaries. Boundaries is the key thing for me. That is really a red flag for somebody that lacks that secure attachment style. Because if you don't have boundaries, it means that you do not understand your core values. There's something that I say about what boundaries are and why we need boundaries. I usually say that we cannot agree on everything with people around us, but there are some things that we can agree on. Those are what we call core values. Every person should have core values, you know. Those are what we call core values. The things that, despite whatever environment or culture you go to, you still have that, some things on the very basis that you're a human being, or on the very basis that you're a Christian, or on the very basis that you are a person of faith, whatever your faith would be. But there are some things that you can agree on, things like respect, things like integrity, things like honesty. There are just some things that you can agree on, things like a privacy, just valuing and honoring people. Those are what I call core values, things that you can't uh, uh, debate over, or things that you can't bring down just so that somebody else gets to accept you. You know, you lower down your integrity just so that, you know, somebody somewhere would accept you. No, no, no. So when you get to have, or when you get to know what your core values are, the core values determine your boundaries, right? Meaning that whatever it is that is outside your core values, you are not going to go against, right? Now, a lot of people don't even have things that they agree on with others. So with us, with my core values, I can come to Dubai today where our host is, and I will still be able to feel secure because I know my core values. My core values I cannot negotiate on. My core values are defining my boundaries. I can go to Italy, you know, and I will still have my core values intact. And these the boundaries I'm going to have. I'm not going to lower them just so that I hit him. You see, I can go to the UK. I still have my core values with the people out there. I'm going to relate on respect, integrity, honoring people. That is what I'm going to have. And most people that don't have core values have insecure attachment styles. They don't have boundaries. So I hope we are learning something there. So it is important that we look at boundaries as not just the philosophy of shutting people out, because mostly that's what we think. We think boundaries is blocking people on Facebook or WhatsApp. You block them, then your boundaries. No, 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 that's not what boundaries. So to me, boundaries is basically protecting what you are nurturing within you, the person you're becoming, the family that you are heading, the profession that you want to be an expert in, the kind of man that you want your wife to be proud of, to be happy of, the kind of woman that you want your man to be happy, that you want your children to be proud of, the kind of mother that you want your children to emulate. The core values that you create around that determine your boundaries. Okay, so it's important that we look at things from that perspective. Now, getting back to attachment styles, like I was saying, we all have these needs that our primary caregivers need to give us, and when we don't receive them, we tend to try to fill them with other things that we think can match up. So most people would go out and pursue finances. They would have all the money in the world, and after they've had all the money in the world, they come back. They still feel the voids. I mean, the psychological core need is not being met by the number of ones and zeros that are in the bank account. Others feel, well, I need to get married. But when you get married, then voila, finally, those actual wounds are now brought up to the surface. I usually say that your childhood trauma, if you don't address your childhood trauma, your relationships will address your childhood trauma. Because a lot of us are triggered by a number of things that we have not talked about and don't even wish to talk about. But then when we're now with somebody that we love, somebody that we envision a life with, somebody that we just want to have as a soulmate, those people will now make us see that, oh, so I am truly impatient. Oh, so this irritates me. Or this terrifies me. This makes me anxious. This makes me talk too much. This makes me have this fear. This makes me feel discomfort, and you realize that, oh, you have a lot of issues. But it's because relationships are drivers in just ensuring that we get to know where we need help. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that your partner will now be responsible to heal you. It is a personal decision that you have to make. You have to make that personal decision when you realize that, okay, I have an avoidant attachment style, for example. I'm going to talk about the types. Or I have an anxious attachment style. Or I have a dismissive attachment style. Or I have a disorganized and preoccupied attachment style. Because most people have those. So you are either insecure or secure when it comes to how you bond with the opposite sex. And we all have different reasons to why we can be insecure when it comes to bonding with the opposite sex. I am not going to mention all of them because I believe every person is unique. And my kind of reasons for why I may be insecure when it comes to bonding with the opposite sex may be different from yours. Yours may be different from the other person. And all we need to know in forming our attachment styles, firstly, is getting to understand the root cause of the of the insecurity, right? So we are, I think, going to begin from there. At this time, do we have any feedback? It's so quiet. Anything are we following before we get into looking at the actual way we can form these attachment styles? Are we following any feedback? Um, okay, I can get that there. In the chat box, Barbara says following, Martha says following. All right, and our host says follow. So I hope we are all following. Okay, great. So let's get started. One important thing that we need to know when it comes to forming our secure attachment style, just like I have said, is getting to know the root cause, the cause, right? Where did this come from? How did I get here? There's a story I usually use, and with this story, it gives a good picture at times. Not really a good picture, but it gives a good understanding, right? So there was a couple that got married, and after they got married, the first night, as men, oftentimes we're prepared. We we have everything in our mind, and we've been looking forward to this day. If you're a Christian, perhaps you kept yourself, and finally you just want to get united with your wife. So they got married, and on the first night, they got to the hotel, just after the wedding reception. They got to the hotel, and the man comes in, very happy, proud man, because he finally has this beautiful woman that he's been waiting for this very day. And the lady stops at the door, and she struggles with coming inside. So he's like, "What's up, baby?" He goes to he goes close, and then she screams. He's like, "Oh, what's the problem?" He goes closer because he's trying to care. Then she screams the more. Now he's confused. He wants to help her, but she's screaming. The more he goes close to her, she screams loud. The hotel staff runs to their hotel door, trying to rescue, this person who's screaming. And they arrive there and they find, well, this new couple that just checked in. And the man is confused, what could be the reason to start? Well, long story short, um, the next day he he tries to go to the mother, I mean the parents of the lady, and he gets to know something that he never knew, right? Days later, they find themselves in a therapy room. And in the therapy room, they get to learn a number of things that they never knew. So it so happens that this lady was sexually abused when she was young, and not once, not twice, not thrice, not 4 times, but every time. So she was sexually abused from as early as 7, and last time it happened was when she was 30, and this was happening in her own house, rather in her own home by her father. And she had developed an attachment style that we call avoidant, dismissive attachment. Because of the trauma that she had endured, she did not allow herself, to get to know another man. So from that time, and it actually happened because, or rather, it stopped happening because the father actually died, when she was about 23. And now that she was in her 30s, I think that was about mid 30s, that's when she was getting married. And she had never talked about it with the Holy Spirit. Never. Because, I mean, We understand uh, what she had to go through and the shame that she was carrying and the burden that she was carrying. And so there are a number of people that go through, it may not be the same, but something similar. You have gone through a different traumatic experience that has caused you, in science, we would say it has left your stress response active. Because whenever we get to have a particular stressor or a distressful situation, our body would alert us, and the stress uh, response would be turned on. But then, after that distressing thing has been handled, our stress system needs to be shut down for the next threat. But for people that go through such things that they endure for the longest of time, their stress response is ever active, ever active. So it may be flight, or meaning that you have to run. So I'm bringing in some science. It may be that you have to fight back, meaning you have to just ensure that you combat and all that. Or it may be that you have to freeze. You just in the moment, meaning that whatever that you go through is present with you, right? You basically have to freeze. And that was the state she was in. She froze. She froze for the longest of time. And so when that night came, the day of her wedding, she was still in the freeze state and she was triggered. Everything came back. The emotion, the triggers and the memory and emotion just came back. And there was no way they were going to have their first, sexual relation in that night because she was triggered. Well, they spent about 6 months in therapy just so that they get to a place where they could at least have their first sexual relation. About 6 months. Today they are still happily married and they have 2 children. That happened back in 2016. But imagine other people that are going through the same thing. Perhaps you are one that has gone through a particular traumatic experience. Perhaps you were sexually molested. Perhaps you are emotionally neglected. You didn't grow up with your mother and your father. Maybe they were present, but they were not just available. They were not present in the moment. They were workaholics, and you never got to have that relation with them. So we now get to have these attachment styles struggling in our adulthood because we never received the emotional and psychological needs. So the causes, the story, I shared that story for you to get a picture. It may be extreme, but others, you may have a situation that perhaps may not be as extreme. But the truth about an experience is that it is valid, especially a traumatic experience, it is valid. It has affected your nervous system. Your nervous system may be dysregulated. And because it has affected your nervous system, it is still affecting you now. Because there's a quote I always use, Sigmund Freud's quote. He says, unexpressed emotions never die, they are buried alive now. And later on show up in uglier ways. And man, do they show up in uglier ways. So it's important that we get to know that there may have been something that had happened. Or you even know maybe right now you remembered something that happened. It may not be sexually related, but perhaps it may have to do with abandonment. Because there are other people that have an attachment style that we call anxious attachment style. These people are victims of being abandoned. So maybe the mother abandoned them, or it could be that she was a workaholic, or it's just that due to circumstances, she couldn't, be there to parent you and she had to abandon you, maybe with your aunt, or she had to abandon you with your granny. So she wasn't there. But then the very fact that you know that your mother is somewhere else, you never got to receive that motherly love. that motherly attention. There's just a different attention that a mother can give. So you never got to have that, and because of that, you now suffer from emotion of neglect, specifically emotional support from a mother. And because of that, you now want to have people or men that will come in your life that will give you that attention that you never had. And so these are people at times that are even manipulative in the sense that they would want you, they would make you feel, uh, um, they would make you feel that whenever you leave them and you're with other people, you're doing something wrong. There are some people in relationships where they just want you to be with them. Oftentimes, these people would even have a love language that falls under quality time. And because they want to be with you, when you are not with them, they make you feel guilty. They guilt trip you that perhaps you're doing something out there. Perhaps you've replaced them. You're not giving them enough attention. You're not meeting their emotional needs. You're not, all these things. And it's because they have an anxious attachment style. Whenever they feel they are being avoided, or whenever they feel they are being abandoned, even when you don't get to reply a message in 4 hours, 5 hours, and you get to reply at night, oh my God, you're in trouble. So they will make a big deal out of that. I know communication is important, but there are people simply because you have not communicated in the time they are expecting you to communicate back. If you didn't respond in that time, it is fire. You're in trouble. The relationship at times may then be put on pause. They will maybe then break up with you if they are narcissists, for example. They will break up with you and come back after 4 3 days. So all these are examples of behaviors that people that have an insecure attachment style that is rather that falls under attachment anxious attachment style, insecure attachment style. All right, so I've briefly given the causes, or rather some of the causes. You can see what was yours, or if you'd have a question, I'd love to hear it. Maybe we can talk that too. And now let me give the list. I have talked about them, and I was saying in this way so that you relate when I finally get to give the list. If you're writing down the first insecure attachment style is called anxious attachment style. Anxious attachment style. Okay. So just remember that you either have a secure attachment style or an insecure attachment. So we just have one secure attachment style. That is what we want to know today, how to be secure. And we have about 3 insecure attachment styles. So the first is anxious. The second is avoidant. So avoidant is also called avoidant dismissive. They go together. Avoidant dismissive. So you are avoiding guys or you're avoiding ladies. At the same time, you're dismissing them at times unconsciously, right? So not that you don't love the idea of a relationship or the idea of love. You love it. You hope for, one day being in a relationship. You're open to it quite okay. But you just have reasons. Maybe your past, whatever happened, you just have reasons to say, no, me relationships, no. But you're not saying it. You just have those core beliefs. And then finally, when you find somebody, you entertain them, quite okay. But when the person becomes serious and you realize, oh, he's in love with me. Me? No way. You sabotage the relationship, end it, find the reason. These are people that will literally say, it's not you, it's me. We have to end this relationship. But it's not you, it's me. They have this excuse. I know a number of people are related. So that's avoidant dismissive attachment style. Then we have the last one, which is called avoidant fearful. avoidant, fearful. At times it is also called disorganized attachment style. So for these, you find that well, they are quite close to the anxious in the sense that there is an element of fear and avoidant, fearful. But then it's the fear that they are not a perfect partner. It's the fear that they are likely to ruin your life if you are together. So these are people that blame themselves for stuff that doesn't make sense and no is highly purposeful. I don't know if I can, manage that. I don't know if, I'm likely not going to be the right partner for this one. And they too love the idea of love, but they will avoid you because of their fears, right? So these are people that are just victims of themselves, self-imposed fears. And so they do it because they care. They are leading you because they care. No, you have a wonderful life. I don't want to mess it up because I'm broken. You are whatever. I don't want to. So they come with this fear because of what they think about themselves. And at times they are good people. The fear is just something that can be worked on, but they feel as though it is just something that would ruin the partner's life for what they perceive the partner's purpose in life is all about. And so they just, he's a good man. I'm very toxic. I don't think we can work. you know so that's the kind. So these are basically the insecure attachment styles. And now, how do you get from your insecure attachment style to a secure attachment style, right? That's the main question here. And